Alright, good morning. Today I'm going to teach you how to catch a bass from beginning to end, and hopefully at the end of this video I will catch a bass, or I may not catch a bass. That'll be the surprise. But I'm starting out with an empty spinning reel. I'm going to show you how to line this up, and let's start from here. Alright, we're going to start by lining our rod. I'm using 8-pound mono. This is trilane. It's 660 yards, so this will actually line several rods, but let's get started. You want to peel off the tape. You want to get the end of your line, and then you want to start feeding it through the top hole on your pole, and following every consecutive hole after until you get down to the spool or the reel. So once you get down to the reel, you want to flip this open so that way you're able to then tie this around. I'm going to set this down right here, and you can really tie any knot. You can look up knots online, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a looping knot. I just loop through, and then I'm going to come through, I'm going to loop through here, and honestly, see, now my loop came off. I really don't think you have to tie that great of a knot. A lot of people say this is the most important part, but my line never gets down to the spool. So now, as you can see there, I have it, it's tight enough, and I'm going to flip that back over, make sure the line feeds through the guide. You can clip this excess, but to keep the video going quickly, I'm just going to start reeling now. I'm holding the line just to give a little bit of tension to begin with. After the line starts going on the reel, then you can just let it go freely. Alright, so now that I have a decent amount of line on my reel, and you can really put as much as you want. You can put as little as you want, as much as you want, it doesn't matter. If it runs out and gets into the spool, just make sure you tie a good knot so that way it doesn't pop off. But now that I'm done, I'm going to clip this end of the line and get ready to tie my lure on. Alright, so now that we have our rod and reel full of line and we're ready to tie on our lure, I'm going to talk about the most versatile lure you could use for bass fishing, and what I would suggest to start out with, because this technique will teach you many different techniques and styles and how to fish, and it's very versatile with what you can use and how you can set it up. That would be the drop shot. The drop shot, you can use worms, curly tails in all different sizes, different types of creature baits, and the setup, I think the typical setup would be to use a drop shot weight, but you can also substitute the drop shot weight and have things that'll work just as well. Like this is a Texas rig weight, or if you had an egg weight, you could line your line through it, tie it off, and that would work just as well as a drop shot weight. Same thing with the clinch weight. You could just clinch it down at the bottom and it would work the same as a drop shot weight. You could use any style of hooks. I think the most used hook, or the most recommended hook, would be a 1/0 finesse hook, which I usually use a 2/0, and my favorite one to use is the extra wide gap hook. But you could also use a worm hook, and you could also use different sizes of hooks. So like I said, it's very versatile. You're able to use almost anything in your tackle box to create a drop shot setup. But let's go ahead and tie one on and show you what it looks like. So let's start off with the finesse 1/0 hook. You want to tie a Palomar knot, and you want to give yourself a good leader, which I think recommended start out is probably about 1 foot. So we'll start out with 1 foot. We'll feed the line through. We'll get it down to a bubble, and then you just feed it through like you're tying a regular knot. And you want to come over the hook. And once you have that, you want to pull the slack. A lot of people will say to wet it. You should wet it. I'm just not wetting it right now so I can talk. And there you go. You have your knot. You can then, since it's not standing up, feed the line back through the eye of the hook. And let's see. You want your hook to stand up like this. And after I did that feed, it stands up. Also, one thing I didn't cover was when you're starting to tie your Palomar knot, you want to come through the front of the eye of the hook. That's how you should start. Next, we will add our drop shot weight. These weights make it real easy. You just feed the line through and you just pull it tight. And the great thing about drop shot is if this gets snagged on anything, your line breaks free and you save your hook and worm. Okay, now that we're ready to choose a worm, I'm going to choose this Morning Dawn Robo Worm because I believe this is the most successful drop shot worm ever used. I hear it in tournaments and on other YouTube videos, and in other people in Arizona using Morning Dawn drop shot catches them bass. So the way I'm going to hook this with this hook is I'm just going to nose hook it. And so right there, when you cast out, the worm's going to sit like that in the water. It'll float a little bit, and then when you wiggle it, it'll give it its action. Real quick, I wanted to show how you would rig this worm on a worm hook or an extra wide gap hook. You would feed the hook through the front of the worm, puncture it out with probably a couple centimeters. What it needs is that amount of space because the worm's going to slide up, it's going to rotate and sit there on the hook. You're then going to grab your finger at the tip of the hook, bend it, and then insert the hook where your fingers are placed. You want to make sure you go through the middle, which I did not. Now I did. And then there you go. You have it rigged. If you want to make it weedless, I would grab this part of the worm and pinch it in that part of the hook. So that way it sits like that. It could come across weeds. It's not going to get snagged on anything. Alright, I've completed my setup with the drop shot. I mentioned that it's the most versatile lure because you can fish this in any season. Winter, spring, summer, fall. You can also fish it a variety of ways. You can drop the lure and drag it across the bottom of the lake. You can pop it, or you can even just drop it, let it sit, and just wiggle your rod and let it do the work for you. So you can fish it a variety of ways. You can set it up a variety of ways. You can fish it any season. That's why I recommend this would be the top lure to use for a beginner to catch your first bass. It's one of the easiest lures to set up, and it's one of the easiest lures to fish, and it's one of the most effective ways to catch bass. I hope you enjoyed the clip. Let's see if I can catch a bass now. Alright, that just about wraps it up on how to catch a bass. And I didn't catch a bass, but I'm glad I didn't, because that just shows that you need to keep practicing. You're not always going to catch a fish. You got to be patient. It's going to take some time before you get your first one. But I hope you enjoyed it.